Welcome to Cyber Threat Intel, your go-to source for the latest updates, news, and insights on cyber threats. Our goal is to arm you with the knowledge to protect yourself in the digital age, whether you're a cybersecurity professional or just curious about the threats lurking in the digital shadows. Make sure to subscribe now on YouTube or your favorite podcast listening platform to join us on the front lines of cybersecurity, because in the world of cyber threats, knowledge is power. Welcome. This is Cyber Threat Intel, and I'm your host, John Good. This is episode number 42, and it is Wednesday, May 29th, 2024. Glad to have you here if this is the first time that you're catching the show. If you're returning from another episode or some other content, glad to have you back. With that being said, if you need to grab a snack or a drink, make sure that you go ahead and do that. And if you want to find any of the articles or anything that we're covering, make sure to check out cyberthreatintel.com. Again, our website is cyberthreatintel.com. With that being said, let's go ahead and flip over to my screen and get into the content. All right, so first article, exploit released for maximum severity, Fortinet RCE bug, patch now. So that's remote code execution. Security researchers have released a proof of concept, a POC exploit, for a maximum severity vulnerability in Fortinet's Security Information and Event Management, their SIEM solution, which was patched in February. Tracked to CVE 2024-23108, this security flaw is a command injection vulnerability discovered and reported by Horizon 3 vulnerability expert Zach Hanley, that enables remote code execution, so RCE, as root without requiring authentication. So anytime that you have a vulnerability that allows remote code execution, especially, there is this prioritization of vulnerabilities and their severity. So when you allow remote code execution, that is pretty significant. That's a pretty important vulnerability or issue to resolve. So keep that in mind as you're going through and you're prioritizing different types. CVE 2024-23108 impacts Forti Client, Forti SIEM versions 6.4.0 and higher, and was patched by the company on February 8th, together with a second RCE vulnerability, CVE 2024-23109, with a 10 out of 10 severity score. So we use these different number systems to actually rate the different kinds of vulnerabilities, if you don't know that. And it's basically a severity score. And the higher that number out of a scale of 1 to 10, the worse that it is. So if it has a 10, obviously that is very, very severe. That is critical. That needs to be patched, as soon as possible so that you don't have any issues. If it's a 1 or if it's very low on that scale, then you can prioritize that towards later, depending on how severe it is, what your patch management process looks like, or your vulnerability remediation timeline requirements are like. So that's how that fits into the process. And then typically you'll have days assigned to that. So if it's a 10 out of 10, you might not want to wait very long. You might have a 7-day window for critical vulnerabilities. If it's a 10, you might say, well, the normal of critical vulnerabilities is 7 days, but because this is so high, we're going to say 3 days or 2 days or whatever it is. And then you apply patches and you fix those issues accordingly. So that's what the process looks like in an enterprise environment if you aren't aware of that. Because I have a lot of people that are trying to get into the career field or haven't worked in cybersecurity. So it's important to understand that. Article also says on Tuesday, over 3 months after Fortinet released security updates to patch the security flaw, Horizon 3's attack team shared a proof of concept, a POC exploit, and published a technical deep dive. So the proof of concept is basically, hey, we could use this, or this basically works to exploit this. And if somebody can figure this out, or if somebody can do more research for this proof of concept, it is very likely that they're going to be able to exploit that. Basically, there's enough indicators that something bad could go wrong. Fortinet vulnerabilities are frequently exploited, often as 0 days, in ransomware and cyber espionage attacks targeting corporate and government networks. Of course, that is because Typically, those organizations are the ones that will have Fortinet at their organization or on their network. It's not a guarantee, but your end user is probably not going to have this Fortinet device or appliance or anything like that at their home. All right, let's keep moving here. Next article, Check Point urges VPN configuration review amid attack spike. Cybersecurity firm Check Point has urged customers to review their VPN configurations to prevent potential exploitation by threat actors seeking initial access to enterprise networks. Writing in a security advisory on Monday, the company reported that VPNs from various cybersecurity vendors have been increasingly targeted. In particular, Check Point has observed attempts to breach its customers' VPNs, identifying a small number of login attempts on May 24th, 2024, using outdated VPN local accounts with password-only authentication. These attacks did not exploit a software vulnerability, but instead leveraged weaker authentication methods. If you don't know what a VPN is, basically a VPN creates a tunnel between 2 points, essentially. So maybe an employee working at home and their corporate office. That's a pretty typical implementation of a VPN. You could also have VPNs between sites called site-to-site VPN. So if you had 2 locations, maybe a headquarters in a branch office or a satellite location somewhere else, then you could have those connect and communicate securely. And so they are a good security practice. But if you have local accounts, that's not always the best solution. And when I say not always, I mean basically never. The quote here says, in light of these events, we've been monitoring attempts to gain unauthorized access to VPNs, a VPN of Check Point customers, the company wrote. Relying on these customer notifications and Check Point analysis, teams found within 24 hours a few potential customers who were subject to similar attempts. The advisory also highlighted the inadequacy of password-only authentication for securing remote access to certain types of networks. So we know in general that password-only authentication, so I only need a username and password, or I only need a password, is a insecure method of authenticating people. It's better than nothing, but it certainly is not that secure, and it's reliant on how strong that password is, how complex it is, how long it is. So that's why we require certain things like that to make passwords stronger. But we've talked about it on this show before, that moving towards a two-factor authentication implementation or requirement in your network is basically a must. It's a mandatory thing that you essentially always need to do in today's world, because passwords can be cracked depending on the length of them and the complexity and all that stuff. Again, if they have quantum computing, they're going to crack it, like that. So it is just not a good security measure in general these days, especially if it's going to access or allow access to sensitive areas of your network. That is even more of a concern. The article also says password-only authentication is considered an unfavorable method to ensure the highest levels of security. We just talked about that. And we recommend not to rely on this when logging into network infrastructure, reads the advisory. So network infrastructure, those are key things within your network. They are appliances, routers, switches, firewalls, whatever, those kinds of things. And those are sensitive areas of your network because those control the data flow, they control your security, they control all that stuff. And if you are allowing somebody to just log in, with a password and not two-factor authentication, not some other kind of measure, well, that's not so great. All right, next article here. Spyware maker PC Tattletale says it's out of business and shuts down after data breach. Founder of the spyware app PC Tattletale said its company is out of business and completely done following a data breach over the weekend. Shutdown comes days after a hacker defaced the spyware maker's website and published links containing a large amount of data from PC Tattletale's servers, including databases of customer information and some victims' stolen data. If you don't know who PC Tattletale is, they were they were a remote surveillance app, often known as stalkerware, for its ability to track people without their knowledge. That allowed the person who planted the app to remotely view screenshots of the victim's Android or Windows devices and its private data from anywhere in the world. PC Tattletale advertised its spyware app as a way to monitor employees, but also openly promoted its ability to snoop on spouses, domestic partners without their consent, which is illegal. So, spyware apps in general and those kinds of things, well, there's a lot of ethical concerns with that. And yeah, we're not going to touch on that or the ethics around spying and spyware apps, but we'll leave it at that. We'll let you. I want to hear what you think in the comments as far as what do you think about spyware apps and how that fits into the equation. Does that make sense? Is it right? Is it wrong? What do you think? I'm curious. The now defunct app has 138,000 customers who had signed up to use the service per data breach notification site, Have I Been Pawned? So, Have I Been Pawned is basically where if companies get pawned, this information goes up on this website, and essentially you can find out if you have been pawned, right? If you were part of a data breach, essentially. PC Tattletale founder Brian Fleming told TechCrunch in a text message on Tuesday that he no longer has access to the company's Amazon Web Services account. He said, "I deleted everything because the data breach could have exposed my customers," said Fleming. So that's an interesting step after the fact. If your company gets breached, how do you go about that? How do you protect your customers? Certainly, that is always of concern. The other thing I would say here too, and this is especially for small businesses, but larger businesses as well, data breaches can take you down. They can put you out of business. They can cause you to go bankrupt. They can cause a lot of issues for companies if you don't have the right security in place. So if your data is stolen and you're a small company, the fines and everything associated to that might just be the end of your days in that company. It's unfortunate, but it absolutely can happen. Just like if a critical server, a payment server, something like that goes down, breaches can take down companies also. So especially with ransomware and those kinds of things, those can be nasty little breaches or security incidents. And if you can't recover that data, or if that data is so critical that your company is reliant on that data in order to actually survive, that can be a serious and catastrophic kind of event that can happen. So you have to be really, really careful. You have to do the best practices, all those kinds of things that we talk about in order to secure your organization. Next article, a U.S. government sanctions cybercrime gang behind massive 9/11 or 911 S5 botnet, rather. U.S. Treasury Department has sanctioned a cybercrime network comprising 3 Chinese nationals and 3 Thailand-based companies linked to a massive botnet controlling a residential proxy service known as 911 S5. Researchers at the Canadian University of Sherbrooke revealed almost 2 years ago in June 2022 that this illegitimate residential proxy service lured potential victims by offering a free VPN service to install malware designed to add their IP address to the 911 S5 botnet. It says at their peak, it had 120,000 residential proxy nodes. That's a pretty substantial service or substantial network. 1 month later, investigative journalist Brian Krebs reported that the 911 S5 imploded after key components of its business operation were destroyed in a security breach. Proxy botnet was resurrected months later as cloud router, according to a February report from cybersecurity company Spur Intelligence. So we do see this with these malicious companies, just like we see it with legitimate companies, where their business operations in some way are so catastrophically impacted that they kind of implode, or they kind of just go bankrupt, or they disband because they can't just continue operations. So it is very similar in a sense to a regular business, and a lot of these groups try to run or operate as a normal business in that sense. So having, HR and like, those kinds of things, whatever they need, accounting, but they try to have those kind of normal business functions so that they can run, because those are standard things with any business. It doesn't mean that just because you're an illegitimate business or a malicious business that you don't need accounting, you don't need to track where you're spending money, those kinds of things. So it says OFAC added that the residential proxy botnet comprised approximately 19 million IP addresses. 19 million IP addresses. So that is where all of our IPv4 addresses are going, apparently. 911 S5 users also used to commit widespread cyber-enabled fraud using residential IP addresses linked to compromised computers. These IP addresses were also used in a series of bomb threats made across the United States in July 2022. And up here, they talk about some other uses they had: coronavirus aid relief, Economic Security Act. Those are kinds of the things that they were submitting fraudulent information for. So, I mean, good. They will come after you, and they will find you. They will punish you. You will face justice, right? Like it's one of these things where so many of these people come to light. They are found, they are identified, trying to travel places and extradited or whatever the case is. And they will come after you, especially like the United States. The United States has a lot of resources. But certainly we've talked about that on this show before. If this is, if people are in countries where the governments are not willing to cooperate, makes it certainly a little bit harder to bring people to justice. And they can kind of hide, in those countries and be essentially sheltered so that they do not have to face the wrath that might be imposed upon them. Next article: Breach Forums returns just weeks after FBI-led takedown. Breach Forums is back online just weeks after the notorious dark web marketplace for stolen data was seized by law enforcement. We talked about that on this show, and we covered that. Online threat hunters spotted the bazaar's resurgence, now seemingly under the control of Shiny Hunters, one of the earlier Breach Forums admins. Marketplace opened for registration on Tuesday. The Breach Forums website and Telegram channel takedown happened on May 15th, with both displaying warnings that they were now under the control of the FBI. Additionally, the souk, where ransomware operators and other miscreants trade pilfered information, showed profile pics of admins Baphomet and Shiny Hunters behind bars, which several InfoSec spectators took to mean that both had been cuffed. We talked about that. It was actually an interesting image. Shiny Hunters reportedly regained access to the crime markets site and a new dark web domain just a day after the FBI takedown, according to hackread.com, which interviewed Shiny Hunters and published their account of wresting control of the domains back from law enforcement. Cop sees an earlier version of Breach Forums in June 2023. Its former admin Connor Brian Fitzpatrick, aka Pompurin, was arrested and then sentenced to 20 years of supervised release in January. Still, the site returned, this time with different admins, but again acting as a ransomware brokerage. So we see that. We see kind of this changing of the guards with these different groups, and the leader will get taken down and then somebody else will take over, or maybe they get raided and then everything completely goes down. We've seen a lot of different kind of scenarios play back and forth with this, and not just with Breach Forums, just in general. So this FBI agent or former FBI agent says that complete dismantlement of an online organized crime group is extremely difficult. Ensuring that all personnel with access are in custody and offline, identifying and seizing critical infrastructure to include the removal of the entire financial, technical, and communication network is necessary to dismantle and severely limit the ability to reconstitute, he told the Register. So that those things have to happen in order for these groups to completely go away, or they still have resources or things that they can use to kind of bring things back online in a different form. So again, yeah, in general, this whole idea of taking down these groups is difficult. It takes time. It takes a lot of resources and effort to actually find these people and to take down all the major players. But hopefully, we continue to get better and better as far as the law enforcement, rather, not me, I'm not law enforcement, but but hopefully they continue to get better and better at identifying these people and finding them, tracking them down, and being able to bring them to justice. So with that being said, that's the last article for today's episode. Again, you can go to cyberthreatintel.com. Again, cyberthreatintel.com, and you can find the article feeds that we covered and talked about. Find all the platforms that we're on as well. I want to thank you for joining me in this episode. I hope that you got something out of this and you come back to continue to get your fix of cyber threat intel. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up for today. Again, this is episode number 42. It's Wednesday, May 29th, 2024. And I'll see you in the next one. See you later. Have a good one. Are you tired of overpaying for cybersecurity training? Are you interested in training from industry professionals? Are you looking for cybersecurity career services? If you answered yes to any of those questions, then cybertrainingpro.com is the perfect platform for you. At Cybertraining Pro, we're a one-stop shop for all your cybersecurity needs. We can train you for industry certifications or just improve your overall knowledge and skills in a certain area. Unlike other platforms, we don't stop there. We can also coach you throughout your career, practice your interview skills, or create a high-performing resume with our career services. Cybertrainingpro.com isn't just another training platform. Students get exclusive access to our private community where we go beyond training courses to provide additional content, tips and tricks, and engagement with both other students and staff. Look, by the year 2025, there could be as many as 3.5 million job openings in cybersecurity. With so much opportunity, why not maximize your career potential with a platform that cares about your success? Come join us at cybertrainingpro.com and start building your future today.